Of course, not all neuronal signals pass from sensation to action in one simple unidirectional flow. This brings us to our third general motif in neuronal circuit organization: recurrence. Recurrence describes the situation where some chain of connected neurons eventually loops back onto itself. Another word sometimes used here is feedback. In the simplest case, neuron A might connect to neuron B, but then neuron B also sends its axon back to neuron A. As you might imagine, more complicated, less direct patterns of recurrence are also possible, sometimes resulting in subtle dependencies between interconnected neurons. Recurrent connections can be excitatory or inhibitory, and a wide range of different kinds of computations can be performed in recurrent circuits, especially when combined with convergence and divergence. One common small circuit motif that relies on recurrence is the so-called central pattern generator, or CPG. In a nutshell, CPGs are neuronal networks that can produce rhythmic, patterned outputs even in the absence of ongoing sensory input, and they're found throughout nature, from tiny invertebrates to humans, controlling everything from rhythmic muscle activities that govern swimming in mollusks to the rhythmic contractions of our own digestive tract. In fact, many complex-seeming motor sequences, like the contractions of our muscles in our legs that enable us to walk, are driven by pattern generators outside of the brain. In fact, we've known since the early 20th century that the basic pattern of muscle activity needed to drive walking can be produced by the spinal cord alone, without need for any descending commands from the brain. How does this rhythmic activity come about? As with most things in nature, there isn't just one answer. Some kinds of neurons contain specialized mechanisms that allow them to fire rhythmically even in isolation. But a common feature in many CPGs is a recurrent connectivity pattern that causes two or more populations of neurons to fire in a rhythmic way out of phase. In the simplest case, imagine a neuron A that synapses onto a neuron B. When A fires, it will cause B to fire. But B doesn't fire right away. It takes some time for the signal to propagate down the axon of A and to activate the synapse. When B is activated, it in turn activates A, again after some delay. If the network is tuned up properly, an unending train of activity can begin, with activity ping-ponging back and forth between neuron A and neuron B. With more than two neurons and different patterns of excitation and inhibition, you can imagine that almost any temporal pattern of activity could be created. It's also easy to imagine how external inputs could modulate the activity of a central pattern generator, slowing it down or speeding it up via neuromodulatory inputs, or commanding the pattern generator to start or stop running.